Gates Mills, and along, I'm also the chair of the English department, and along with me.
Hi, I'm Deanne Nowak, and I am part administrator and part teacher, and I'm one of the mentor advisors for the entrepreneurship factor, so you'll hear more about what that is.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to a number of people and organizations, PSPP, and Hathaway Brown, our neighbors and friends. What a great event that you folks have put on. I can't imagine the level of planning. I know Camille's going to be coming in and out, but everybody's been so helpful, and you folks really did a great job. So I wanted to start a little bit chatting about the vitals of Gilmour Academy before we get into the Vector program. And keeping in mind that the Vector program is actually in its second year, progressing into its third year. So a little bit about Gilmour Academy, founded in 1946, for those who aren't from the Cleveland area. This is a mouthful, so it is private, independent, Catholic, founded by the Brothers of the Holy Cross. It's coeducational, and it is a boarding and day school. So that is really a mouthful, but we do serve a number of people in a number of different ways. We're fortunate to have a 144-acre campus in Gates Mills, Ohio, which is about a 30-minute drive east from the center of the city of Cleveland. We make that half-hour drive on the bus pretty often. And on that campus, it houses students that are 18 months to 18 years. So there is a lower school, a middle, and an upper school that all share the same campus. And when we say 18 months to 18 years, there's the early beginnings program that starts at 18 months that leads into a Montessori kindergarten, and then a traditional lower, middle, and upper school. And when we're talking about the students that populate, we serve over 650 students currently, and of those 450 students, 650 students, 436 of them are grades 9 through 12. We are both in the upper school currently. And when we break that down further, we have boarders. 15% of our student population is full-time on campus in our dorms, and of that 15%, they represent 15 states in the United States, and we also have international boarders representing South Korea, China, Canada, and we actually have a student from Switzerland as well. So that tells a little bit about Gilmour as far as the vitals. And what really is the most important thing when we talk about not only this Vector program, but our curriculum as well, is that everything is mission driven. And we'll circle back to this a couple of times throughout, but our job as faculty and staff at Gilmour is to try and help the students to develop the competence to see and the courage to act in creating a more humane and just society. So when we talk about what a Vector is and what we're doing with our curriculum, we always try and circle back and find our way back to the mission statement. So that's a little bit about Gilmour. So what exactly is a Vector? So Vector is a graduation strand program, again, moving into its third year, and it is a concentrated set of experiences that all relate to a specific field or a specific theme. And so what we're trying to do with the program is we're trying to tap into the passion of our students, and we're trying to do it in a number of different ways. Some students are going to be just completely driven, and those type A personalities are going to find their way, and they have a sense of what they'd like to do. But we're also trying to find some of those students who need that additional push and who might need additional guidance, and that's where our mentorship comes in when we're talking about the structure of the program. So what makes these students tick? What do they do on campus, and what do they also do off campus? And a lot of this is really, we're dependent upon our fellow faculty members and our staff members to tell us, they go out and help us find some of these students who might not say, this program could be for me. And the program isn't for everybody, so as we talk a little bit more about it, we'll figure out what a typical Vector student might look like. And a lot of students, believe it or not, don't like to be told what to do. You know, when we talk about things that are being prescribed and the laundry list of things that they have to take, they tend to shy away from some of the things that they were forced to do. And so what we want to do is make them greater stakeholders in their learning plan, and through this personalization, they feel a sense that they have a little bit of a say in what they're studying, and how can they apply that passion within our curriculum, and how can we provide the foundation, and then and like we mentioned, have a cohesive set of experiences for them. And probably one of the most important things, especially in some of our internship programs, we talk about place-based education. It's one thing, we're all confident that we're solid educators, and what we do within the four walls of a classroom, we all do wonderful things, but how can we make that come alive for them? And how can we take them out and get that real world experience? And place-based education is just going to reinforce and maybe open up new avenues for learning for them once they're out there. So that's really what we're trying to do with the program in general. So currently we have 5 vectors, and they are science and medicine, engineering and design, creativity and personal expression, entrepreneurship and commerce, which Deanne is the current mentor for, and civic engagement, which is actually mine. So we were talking a little bit about my bio. I love Cleveland. I make no mistake about it. I don't hide it. I'm an ambassador. I am a cheerleader, and I'm really excited. We talk about changing the narrative of what goes on in Cleveland. My narrative is consistent. It's go Cleveland, and let's see what we can do together. So we actually just added a few, and we'll talk a little bit about the process or the progress of the program, because interest has gone up a little bit. We've had to actually add a mentor or 2, but as of right now, this is how we've constructed the program for the first 2 years. So what builds the vector? So we mentioned we want to find and tap into the passion, and then we want to figure out what courses we actually offer that can add that academic foundation to what will then become the vector. So all of our vectors are rooted into the curriculum, and these are courses that exist, and eventually we want to get them out of the classroom, as mentioned, that place-based education. So students are going to take control, and with the help of the mentors, we're going to try and find them some off-campus experiences, whether it's a talk at our Cleveland City Club, or whether it is meeting with a nonprofit organization, or working with scientists, researchers, and doctors. So these student-initiated experiences are going to be assessed by a point value system, and as they move through their student portfolios, which we'll get to, all of these student experiences will accumulate. They'll be working towards something. And then eventually, these capstone projects are also located within. And one distinction I really wanted to make is that the internships that we're really focusing on today, while we're specifically focusing on the Vector program, these internship opportunities exist outside of the Vector program. So even if you're not within a specific vector, these internships are available to you if you do complete some of the prerequisites. So you can supplement, and they are a part of the Vector program, but they also, you don't have to be in this program to take advantage of some of the internship opportunities where we're creating them off campus. So the Capstone Project, there are 3 internships that exist, and we also have independent studies where you can kind of create your own internship. So we have the first one, actually the first 2, Deanne manages and is the mentor for. One is called Venture, and that deals with entrepreneurship, and Catalyst deals with science and medicine. And Deanne will go in greater depth when she goes into the history of how we got to the Vector program, and how these internship programs still run independently as well. So the Capstone projects will eventually be, the last one, by the way, is the one that I run, leadership and civic learning. And so we have all three of those, and then student-built independent studies. So a sample vector might look like this, and because I do leadership and civic learning is my independent study, and I run the civic engagement vector, we have existing prerequisite courses within our curriculum. And so, say for mine, I have a course called Rebuilding Cleveland. So it is about the history, current affairs, and the future of the city. So as a sample class week on Tuesday, let's say we're learning about Ohio City. And we'll talk a little bit about the history of Ohio City, how it was previously its own entity and how it battled with Cleveland over time for shipping rights on the Cuyahoga River. We'll learn all about Ohio City, and in the meantime, in the background, I'll be speaking to Ohio City Incorporated and setting up tours so that they can actually go to Ohio City, and we'll be also harvesting from the news, whether it's via Twitter or whether it is online in other capacities, Cleveland.com. Students are, instead of being fearful of technology, we're trying to embrace technology because, everybody said, Twitter is no good. Well, that's a great news. That's where I get a lot of my news, and so they should be able to get a lot of their news. We just need to teach responsibility. That's a little bit off topic. So Rebuilding Cleveland is the prerequisite course, and we expose them to as many things as possible. So we'll talk about nonprofit organizations, we'll talk about public policy, we'll talk about economic development. So all of these different elements, we're trying to expose them to as much as possible, and they'll be off campus once a week. And it's challenging as far as setting everything up, but we'll be able to expose them to all the different facets that help make the city and help it run efficiently, and where and it's not all beautiful. When we talk about Cleveland, we love to focus on the good things that are happening, but also some of the challenges throughout the city. So once we've exposed them in Rebuilding Cleveland, we'll move on to some electives. Let's say, and this is just a sample, let's say they are moved by human rights or constitutional law, and they take both of these courses which exist into our curriculum. They have to take 2 electives in addition to the prerequisite. So now we've built within our curriculum, we're making that idea of a cohesive set of experiences. All the while, we're providing them with the off-campus student-initiated experiences. And so when these student-initiated experiences, they come in the form of, let's say, city club, volunteering. When they go for Rebuilding Cleveland, maybe they will go and shadow and see what it looks like at a refugee camp. Not a refugee camp, but a refugee farm. And in addition, one of the biggest components of the Vector program is also leadership. So how are these students going to be self-motivated, and how, we try and cultivate leaders, and we want them to be civically responsible and civically engaged. And so one component that we do focus on is also leadership, not only within the curriculum, but how will they take this knowledge and become socially and civically responsible. And then finally, we come to a capstone project. Let's say that person really enjoyed when they went to a refugee farm. Let's say they want to try and help. The ultimate goal for the capstone project is not necessarily to make coffee and make copies, because that's really not an engaged experience. Maybe as a shadow when you're learning the ropes a little bit, that could be a part of it. But let's say they go to refugee response. They should help out as much as they can with developing programming. They're sharing ideas, and we know that it's not necessarily at a peer-to-peer level, but we really want to try and find mentors who are willing to listen and work with some of our young folks. And then so programming, and maybe they don't have much of a social media presence. So how can they identify some ways where a current organization might be improved? What do they do well? And they're constantly analyzing, and they'll be doing research, and they'll be producing journal entries and conversing with their mentor, and we want to watch how that program evolves for them. So we have a way to track this, and we've been we've been battling with how to document what they're doing, because we also want to document as a means to communicate with mentors and our teachers, but we also want to be able to use this as a way to share and celebrate what our students are doing with the Gilmour community and the community at large. And so we actually shifted from using a very basic Google Sites, we set up a template, and now we actually shifted over to something, it's a Cleveland-based company, it's called TAC. And I want to show you how we're trying to share our student work. So we have some portfolios that we're documenting, and they will be all their entire time through the program. They'll cycle through these, and if this doesn't come up, we can go to the side. But it's actually a really sleek way. We put it onto the landing space on our Gilmour website, and everybody will have access to it. And it's hyperlinked directly to their individual TAC page. So we have a central page, and then it moves on to all of the links as well. And if that's not working,
The problem is that it's up on this page but not the other, so I'm trying to find the control panel to switch the setting.
okay. All right. Well, we can hold off on that. We'll get back to it. So that's essentially what we wind up doing. I think she took me out of
Sorry,
the
I think I'm.
PowerPoint. All right. Did you take that off?
Oh.
There's the one.
All right, wait, it should open now, I think.
All right. All right. Here we are. So this is what the central hub page, if you could scroll down a little bit. So this is where this would be visible from the Gilmour website, and as we scroll down, it explains what a vector is, how to set up one of these portfolios, and as we scroll down a little bit further, one of our students works in audiovisual, so we have a sample of his work, and as we scroll down, we will actually see the list, and they're separated. So this is actually really important. So when we talk about student-initiated experiences, we try and provide them, we curate as much as we can. So Case Western Reserve sends us a lot of mailers, a lot of community organizations will send us their mailers, and we'll put these experiences up on their calendar, and once you click on the calendar, it'll list all of the events that are available to them, and that's where the mentorship comes into play. So we also have a running list of summer opportunities, because we know that the school year doesn't end for those who are truly driven. And so we'll see a number of these are Case Western Reserve, and they vary in their focus. So once they're done with the calendar, if you could scroll down again, yeah, I would just go right to the top left. Yeah, and then scroll down a little bit more. They can track their own progress. And these are divided up by the specific vector. So if you could click on Claudia, and we can just see a very brief example of student work. So this is something, and by the way, I'm a huge TAC proponent, in case you haven't noticed. Cleveland-based company, they produce some really beautiful things, but this is a student's work. If you could scroll down a little bit more, a little bit about herself, and if you continue on. So we get a little personal view of what the student's interested in. We had them write an essay to talk about what they'd like to do with the program, and eventually goals and action steps. She's just not a bystander, she's an active participant. And when you scroll down a little bit farther, we go over her initiated experiences, and she actually makes us look really attractive. So Catalyst is actually one of the programs that Deanna will talk about just a little bit more. And we encourage them to take pictures of places they've been, explaining what they're doing and what their takeaways were. So this is a very active student. And we'll notice that if you're in one specific vector, that doesn't mean that you have to stay on the straight and narrow. You'll see that a lot of these vectors intertwine in many ways. So for example, if she's doing, she is a Catalyst member, but she also has an entrepreneurial spirit. And so we'll be able to try and mesh those. Somebody is actually combining science and creativity and personal expression. She's interested in music and dance and how that can be used for medical, for healing. And so where we would have never envisioned that those two vectors to intertwine, we actually encourage that, so there can be some cross-pollination at certain points. And so I'm good with that. So everyone will be keeping, you notice that some students are a little bit more advanced than others, some haven't put theirs up, but this is a recent addition, and we really want to share with the Gilmour community and the community at large what our students are doing. So that's a little bit about the program as a whole, and now Deanne's going to talk a little bit about the history of internship programs at Gilmour, because she's been putting in years of work and done a really solid job.
Which is the form this way.
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm going to date myself a little bit. I stepped on Gilmour's campus in the fall of 1999. And I had just moved to Cleveland from Buffalo. My husband was part of the KeyBank Society merger. And so I left a job I loved, teaching pharmacy school in Albany, New York, and moved to Cleveland. And there was an ad in the paper for an AP Chem teacher at Gilmour Academy. I didn't know what Gilmour was. I thought, okay, I'll teach AP Chem until I find a real job in the Cleveland area. for a college position. And I've been there ever since. So obviously it's struck a passion in me. But the day I stepped on campus and realized it was an hour drive from Macon Lake, where I lived for 13 years before I moved to Chesterland, I said, I don't think this is for me. You can't pay me enough to drive here an hour each way 3 times a week to teach one section of AP Chemistry. And a very forward-thinking director of upper school said to me, sit down, let's talk. Would you be interested, I'm a former research scientist, she said, would you be interested in starting a program where students would get real-world experience doing research? And she said, you can have free reign, you can design it any way you want. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. So that's what I did. My first year there, I designed what is now called the Catalyst program. So when I was teaching pharmacy school, I had students working with me. We had an undergraduate research program, and I was doing I'm a synthetic organic chemist, so I was making drugs. And my research involved air-sensitive, moisture-sensitive, explosive chemicals. So it was really tedious, sophisticated work. And I had some of the best and brightest fourth-year students working in my lab. And they would come in for a couple hours a week, and they would do the work, and they became very skilled. And at the end of that program, I took them to an undergraduate research symposium in West Virginia. And as we were practicing, they'd give their presentation, and I'd start asking them questions. I said, well, why did you do that? Because you told me to. I said, okay, what are you going to do next? Whatever you tell me to do. So what I realized was that I had trained really good technicians, but I had wanted to train scientists. I had wanted to train students to think like scientists, and I had failed miserably. And when I sat back and said, well, how do you do this? I knew I had no more time. I mean, they did not come to the lab very often. In the summer, I had them full-time, but even then, I was trying to keep them safe, and I was trying to make sure the reactions went the way they were supposed to. So I knew that the mentors didn't have a lot of time, and the mentors aren't trained typically to be teachers, especially to work with high school students. So we designed the program so that there's a teacher at Gilmour, a former scientist, and there are 3 of us in the science departments that are former scientists. And there's a mentor on site. And it is a rigorous course. It is not a shadowing experience. It is not a science fair project. It is a rigorous, basically an apprenticeship with stuff on the other side. So the student goes and spends the equivalent of a class time, 4 hours a week, at their site. Usually it's in one day. We have a block scheduling, so the students leave D period around 2 o'clock and they stay till about 6:30. And they jump into a project. They usually have a mentor. It's often a research assistant or an upper level graduate student or a postdoc. And they do whatever they can and they learn about the project. Now going once a week is very fragmented. Things happen in between. Well, in Catalyst, it's up to the student to learn what went on while you weren't there. They have to write a journal entry to me every week saying what they did, why they did it, and then they have to analyze and evaluate what the results mean. They have to raise questions. They have to tell me what is going to happen next. They have to explain all the procedures. If they're doing PCR, they better know how PCR works, not just naming the steps, but why and how it works. And then the last part of it promotes independent learning. They have to tell me what their homework is going to be. So in traditional classes, and this goes with I just went to Kelly's presentation on self-organized learning environments, and this is perfect for that. So they have, instead of me telling them, this is how you learn about PCR, you're going to go do this webinar, and then you're going to come back, and I'm going to give you a test, and I'm going to tell you if you know it. It's not how it happens in Catalyst. They tell me what they have to learn, they tell me how they're going to learn it, and then in the next journal entry, they tell me what they learned. And in the meantime, I am writing questions, and they have to answer those questions from the prior journal. So it's a very rigorous program. It's been extremely successful. I did a longitudinal study on the program when I got my master's. That was my master's thesis in 2007. And we found that the majority of Catalyst students stayed in science when they went to college, and furthermore, they took the initiative to do undergraduate research with their mentors. So these are some of the statistics. We're in year 17. We've had 232 internships. Some students have done more than one. The most a student has done is 3, so each is a semester long. We have a summer option. That's a 5-week full-time condensed experience. We've had 205 students. 65% of them have been female. 10 to 20% of the graduating class participates in Catalyst, and about 30% of our graduating class goes into science-related professions. We've had 103 mentors, and we've worked with 23 different institutions. Many of them are large institutions like Case or the Cleo Clinic, some of the other colleges in the area, but we've also worked with small businesses. We've worked with the Cleveland Museum of Art and Art Conservation, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. So, how does this relate to Vector? Well, this is kind of the ultimate that we want our students to achieve. We want them to be able to go out in the world, work in an environment that's authentic, critically analyze it, and know how to learn independently. So I was asked by administration to start other programs because a third of our students go into science, about a third go into business, marketing, finance, and about a third go into other areas. So I researched a lot of different areas, and I came up with entrepreneurship as a really nice, fertile area for our students to do internships in. And I liked entrepreneurship because there's creativity involved, there's problem solving, there's collaboration, there's measured risk taking. So it seemed like a really good area. By the way, this is our Catalyst brochure. That's one of our students who ended up getting a PhD. So when we design a program, we have to have clear outcomes for the program. It is a course, so we have to have outcomes and we have to assess those outcomes. We require internal and external mentoring because, as I said, we don't want it just to be a shadowing program. And then there's some programs where kids go and they work with the mentor and then they come back and they do a 15-20-minute presentation. And some students can do that and make it look real good, but there's not really deep learning involved. So all through the semester, we make sure that there's deep learning and mentoring. There has to be opportunities for feedback because we don't expect the kids to come in knowing what to do. So I'll give you an example. I, as a scientist, was never ever trained to write science for a layperson. And that's one of the biggest problems we have with journalists trying to report on science because the scientists don't know how to talk to the journalists. So we teach the students to write about science to the layperson by having them write a newspaper article to the Gilmour community about the project they're doing. And it has to be engaging and use language that people would understand. And then finally we have student accountability. Obviously they're being graded, and there's a final assessment at the end where mentors and parents and the Gilmour community are invited. It's a 20-minute PowerPoint, no notes, and there's questions afterwards from their mentor and other mentors that are in the room. So it's probably one of the hardest things they have to do at Gilmour, but they do well with it. To secure lasting partnerships, people ask me, how do you get mentors? It's an art, really. And the best way to do it, I'm really good at getting mentors in science because I was a scientist and I know what they're going through. I know what they're doing and I know the perspective. It's harder for me in the newer program that I run, Venture, the entrepreneurs, because I've not walked in their shoes. But, so understanding mentor perspective is really important. Making things easy for them. I do all of the work on that side. I work with the students, I help them find resources,